It's with great sadness that I have to announce the deaths of former councillor John Guy and former mayoress Marjorie Goddard. Joan served both as a councillor and a cabinet member on the council from 1995 to 1999, and then 2011 to 2015. Marjorie was mayoress from 2010 to 2011. Our thoughts are with the family and friends. Would members please join me for a minute's silence? Thank you. Would you please remain standing for prayers?
Let us pray. God, our Heavenly Father, we remember and hold before you our departed sisters Joan and Marjorie. With thanksgiving, we remember their service to this borough of Redcar and Cleveland. We pray in your mercy, they may now rest in peace, and through our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, rise in glory. Amen.
Amen.
Almighty God, the maker and ruler of all things, we humbly beseech you to bless and prosper the people of this borough of Redcar and Cleveland. Strengthen our commerce, sustain our industries, nourish our agriculture, strengthen and sustain our communities, bless the work of our charities, uphold and support our children, and prosper all places of learning, that this borough of ours may be a place where all generations can truly flourish. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. May God grant to the living grace, to the departed rest, to the Church, to the Queen, to the Commonwealth, and to all people unity, peace, and concord, and to us and to all God's servants, life everlasting. And may the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon you and upon your counsels this day and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. We'll take tributes. Anybody would like to give tributes? We'll take ex-Councillor Guy first, and I would just like to ask Councillor Goddard if it would be all right if anybody would like to make tributes. Is that all right with you? Thank you very much. So could we have, please, Councillor Sue Jeffrey?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And can I just say how sad today is, and you know we all very much feel for Ray, but we'll talk about Marjorie in a minute. In terms of Joan, I just wanted to put on record all of our condolences to her family. Joan was a long-standing member of the Labour Party. She served Saltburn really well. She was cabinet member for children's services, and she had at her heart concern for children and young people. She was a long-serving governor as well, and I think she was a teacher too, and children were always right there in everything that she thought about. She was also, as I say, she lived in Saltburn and was a councillor for Saltburn, and she cared very much about Saltburn and the area and what happened there. I was really sorry to hear about her death. She was a friend to us over a number of years, and as I say, condolences are with her family.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hannaway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't know Joan very well, but I do have obviously a strong sense of following in her footsteps as Saltburn Labour councillor and lead member for children. Seeing her around the town, she obviously she showed great endurance through her illness. I would often see her moving slowly along the street, and she obviously wanted to remain engaged in the life of the town to the last possible minute, and showed a great deal of commitment to it and diligence. She did give me some good advice when I started this role. She said, you probably think this role is mainly about schools, don't you? But she said, you'll find that children's social services takes up a lot more of your time. So I'd like to express our thanks to Jo, and she also leaves behind a very thriving branch in Saltburn, which during her final years went from very small meetings in the library to much larger ones above the marine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hannaway. Is there any more for Councillor Guy?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. As a previous fellow ward member for Saltburn, I served with Councillor Guy, as she then was, and I was aware of her industry and her dedication to the work that she did for the residents of the ward. So I can recall that. I was fortunate to be able to attend the memorial service for Joan Guy, and listening to her family, it clearly represented and reflected the work that she'd done throughout her life, much of which was manifested in her work while she was a councillor at Saltburn. So certainly on behalf of residents of the town, I would like to record our thanks for her service.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any more to speak for Councillor? Could we please take tributes for Marjorie? And may I start off by saying Councillor Goddard and Marjorie attended most of the things that I've had over the year as mayor, and given a lot of support and a lot of friendship over that year to them. And may I just say, a lovely lady you would not wish to meet. So my heartfelt thoughts are with you. Thank you. Councillor Lanigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to pay tribute to Marjorie, Councillor Goddard. She was a wonderful lady, always extremely friendly, and we used to have a laugh and a giggle, and she was a lady and a very kind and considerate person, and I just want to add my condolences from what the mayor has said, and I'm sure she'll be about somewhere. She'll be watching us and saying, look at them lot down there, but I'm extremely sorry for your loss. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Sue Jeffrey.
Yeah, I just want to say to Ray, I'm sorry to Ray this morning. What happened to Marjorie? She was a lovely, lovely lady. And not there's much more I can say. Just really, really sad.
Thank you to Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Eyre.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've known Marjorie for nigh on 40 years. It was many years afterwards there when I met up there with Ray through our trade union activities. even though we both worked at different places. Marjorie, I was going through a rough time in life. I'm not looking for sympathy. I was living rough. But Marjorie there was the manageress of the canteen in the Redcar workshops. And I got to know Marjorie there. And she knew about my plight, but she always made sure that I had a decent meal at dinner time, and at tea time there she always packed me a little snack to go home with. I know it's an old cliche, but on Marjorie, I don't think I've ever, in fact I've never heard Marjorie say a wrong word about anybody. And by hell, she used to get some stick by some lads in the canteen. She was a genuine, trustworthy, and a real lovely woman. And I'm sure, with all others in this chamber, I would miss her sorely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only had the pleasure of meeting Marjorie a couple of times, but when I did, it was just that, a really genuine pleasure. But really, I just want to offer Ray our deepest sympathies, all of our thoughts and our love at what is obviously a very difficult time, but you're not on your own, Ray.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Any more? That's right. Councillor Thompson.
What are we going to do without her? It was with great shock that we were advised of Marjorie's leaving us today. I bet Marjorie and Ray, we talk about him as if he's not listening, but he's with us, on many different occasions, most of them informal, some doing our work. I have to say she was very good as chauffeurs. What he's going to do, I don't know. I might be receiving a call, can you come and take me from A to B very soon? I remember at the commemoration of the miners' memorial service at St Helens, and who was running around getting the tea and the scones, even looking after me. Good memories. Being accosted on Darlington Station. Where was I going? Why wasn't I at work? How did I get leave? All the questions. So we've got wonderful memories. We will hold on to those. I'm sure you've got many more. And to reiterate the previous speaker, we are here if there is a need, and we will always be here for both of you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. And it goes without saying, I think all our thoughts are with you. So, thank you. On with business. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Cooney, Finley, Mrs Foster, Councillor C. Jeffrey, Councillor G. Jeffrey, and Councillor Walsh. Is there any more?
Lucky. Sorry? Oh, Councillor Corley. Yeah, Kerry said she might not make it. Councillor Stainthorpe. And I think you said Councillor Mrs Foster, didn't you?
Yes.
I think that's all us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillors Ovens and Harding.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? If so, the form has been circulated. To go on to confirming the accuracy of the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 30th of March 2017. Could we have those confirmed?
Yep, I'll move those minutes. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Can we have a seconder? Minutes moved. To receive announcements from the Mayor and the leader. And would like to thank everybody that made a contribution or came to the Mayor's Ball on the 27th of April. We raised £7,000 on the night, which has gone a long way to thank you to everybody who'd either attended or made a contribution. The Mayor's investiture ceremony will be held on Friday the 26th of May, at Kirkleatham Museum. If you have not already done so, could you please confirm your attendance? We haven't added the full total up of what I've had, but it's well over 20,000 for the year. So that will be announced maybe next week. So that's my announcements. Oh, I'd just like to, one more. We went down Bowlby Potash. We've just had a demonstration, and we went down Bowlby Potash the other day, and I was very, very impressed, and I think we all were that went down, and especially with the dark matter thing. It was like being involved with Star Trek. I loved it. I'd just like to say that I think they deserve a bit of our support. It's a lot bigger than what we think down there. Right, has the leader any announcements?
I do, Chair. Yeah, Mayor, thank you very much. Can I first of all say about Bowlby Potash, we're all talking about the dark matter, aren't we, and the fact that we're going to discover life on Mars and all that sort of thing. That actually isn't the purpose of Bowlby Potash mine. Its purpose is to dig out polyhalite and create jobs and things, so we just need to remember that. But I'm with you on the dark matter. I think that's absolutely hugely interesting, and more should know about it, and particularly our school children, if we could get them involved in science and engineering subjects as a result. Right, a few things I want to talk about. First of all, my normal announcement about the SSI task force figures. You had those at the end of last month. You will get the next set at the end of next month. So those should be with you, and you should be able to see the progress that's being made there. I just want to mention very briefly Dave Walsh. Dave is sadly in hospital again. Some of you will know that he had a bit of a fall after executive scrutiny last week. You'll note that it is his report that's in the council chamber, in the council book today. I'm going to be formally moving his report, but I'm not going to be presenting it. So what I would ask is if that you do have questions on the report, if you can please ask them as you would do normally, and we'll make sure Dave gets those, and then he will respond to those, because I think that he would very much like to do that. He doesn't want anybody else to take his portfolio. His brain is active, even if his body isn't working at the moment. Thirdly, I just wanted to mention, you recall I talked about last time the governance working group and the questionnaires for the boundary review, and I asked you all to fill them in. 31 of you have returned them, so thank you all very much who's done those. I think it's probably a bit late now to return any more, but for those of you who did, that's very much appreciated, because I think that will provide us with some excellent information to inform the boundary review process going forward. Finally, I just want to refer to what happened this day last week. For those of you who don't remember, that was the mayoral elections. It's sort of ingrained on my brain in a way that you would expect it to be. I mean, it was six months of hard work, I think it's probably fair to say. And I've just got a couple of things to say about that. The first and obvious one is to obviously congratulate the new mayor, Ben Houchin. I do have to say, though, very clearly, I didn't want him to win. But, you know, these things happen, and he's now elected, and of course, we as an authority will want to work with him and ensure we get the best for Redcar and Cleveland and for the Tees Valley as a result of his election, and certainly I'll be meeting with him shortly to start having those conversations. The second thing is I just wanted to say a very big thank you as well to everybody right across this chamber who's given me good wishes, whether you supported me or not. I was very grateful for those. And it was very kind of you to pass those kind words on. Although in Steve Kay's case, it was just a little bit sort of iffy sometimes, but I was grateful. Thank you, Steve. I know he's going to say that now. Oh, you did actually. You did. I did just get a cuddle off, Steve. So there you go. I think the other thing is, I have to say that the last 6 months has actually been a unique opportunity to meet people from across the Tees Valley that I just wouldn't have had a chance to meet and talk to otherwise. And I think what's come through from speaking to all those people is that we do collectively, whatever political party we are from, have a common agenda to ensure that we have a prosperous and successful future as a Tees Valley. And most particularly, and this was the thing that came up more than from anything else, for our children. It's our children we care about and our grandchildren, and making sure that they get the jobs and the opportunities. And that's why we're all in this business at the end of the day, isn't it? So that's really important. I have to say that every borough in the Tees Valley that I visited is definitely unique. But what I want to say about them is that they're all absolutely brilliant. So I don't know when the last time was any of you visited Darlington, Hartlepool, Middlesbrough or Stockton, but I suggest you go there because they are great places. And if you haven't been recently, you know, go and see them. They're brilliant places to visit, and loads going on there that are perhaps you wouldn't be surprised to find. But having said that, I think there is no doubt for me that one thing stands out from this election, and that is Redcar and Cleveland Borough. I mean, our industry, our innovation, our talent, our resilience, our great landscape, our great attractions, our great people. The fact is, this is just a great place to live and work. Redcar and Cleveland is up there with the best, and that's what I'll remember most from this election. The fact is that we're up there, we're in there, and I'm going to try and help ensure that we continue being just in that place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Is there any announcements from the Chief Executive?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a sad note, really, to say that this is Miranda's last meeting as she leaves the authority tomorrow to take up a new role with the NHS. She's been with us now for 2.5 years, and I'd just like to express my thanks to Miranda for the way that she supported me, particularly through the work on the SSI task force. So I'd appreciate if you could join me and show your appreciation to Miranda and wish her well.
Thank you. Right, to consider questions from the public, which notice has been given, none. To consider and agree any reports from the Cabinet and the Council's committee. The first report would be on governance review and constitution update. Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is in front of members today because it's been through the Cabinet on the 18th of April, but as it's a constitutional change which is suggested, it needs to be approved by full council. Just a bit of background to it. Members will be aware that previously we arranged a cross-party working group to look at our governance review, and this is the first set of proposals that we have from that cross-party group. There are 3 types of amendments which are referenced in your Cabinet papers of the 18th of April. The first tranche of amendments is to reflect previous council decisions. In this category, the major amendments are to update our constitution to reflect our new scrutiny arrangements which came in a couple of years ago, to update our senior management structure in light of the last Cabinet decision to change the senior management structure, and also to reflect current arrangements regarding committee functions and responsibilities. These 3 changes are appendices 1 to 3. The second tranche of changes are technical amendments to comply with more recent legislation from government. On the second category, these are around complying with notice periods, so that we have to comply with a 28-day notice period, and also to allow the use of media within meetings to reflect changes at a national level. The third tranche of amendments are additional recommendations which have been proposed thus far by the cross-party working group, which I mentioned earlier. And these have been changed around Council Procedure Rule 11 so that we can allow questions to the members of the Police and Crime Panel, and it confirms the validity of asking questions to members of the Fire Authority. We can also now, it is proposed, question members of the Tees Valley Combined Scrutiny Committee members. And I do note that you have in front of you a briefing from Executive Scrutiny and what they discussed on the 4th of May. This report has been through Cabinet, Governance and Executive Scrutiny. And Executive Scrutiny at point 2 requested that questions relating to the Tees Valley Combined Authority Scrutiny Committee should be addressed to the representatives of that said committee, and I'm happy to move that slight amendment to this report. There's also, back to the third category, the suggestion that we introduce a priority order for members asking more than one question, so that everyone's first question would be heard first before any member's second question at a council meeting would be heard. We think this is a fair way of trying to distribute the council's time, and also questions at a council meeting would move to the back of the agenda so that we can get through the decision-making process first, so that anything that requires a vote is up front and the questions follow later. The final recommendation is around unanswered questions at council meetings. So instead of being a backlog like we had a few months ago at council meetings, we're suggesting that unanswered questions be answered in writing to all members of the council unless the asker of that question specifically requests that it is heard at the next meeting. The recommendations are on page 88 of your April Cabinet book and on page 19 of your council agenda book today, and I recommend these changes to council.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. Have you a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glyn Nightingale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't want to speak in general, apart from one point I'll make later on. I'm a member of the Tees Valley Combined Authority Scrutiny Board, pro temp at least. And I think I want to explain the reasoning behind this point that is in the report from the Executive Scrutiny Committee. I think the essential thing there is to ensure that when questions are asked to representatives from this council, it does allow the different perspectives from the representatives to be addressed in the council meeting. There's one Conservative, one Liberal Democrat and one Labour member. So I think it's important that we should have the wide-ranging perspectives that may be likely to occur represented in the forum of this council. The second point, of course, is that it also allows us to reflect in relation to the point that the council leader has just made, that we are representing the borough in this particular forum, and it's important that we work as a team. And I think that has actually been the case. I'm sure that Councillor Norton and Councillor Thompson would agree with me on this, so that we can represent the borough as a team and reflect this when we report back to the appropriate bodies of the council. The final point I want to make, Mr Mayor, is that in general, as far as the governance review is concerned, which is going to be continuing, of course, I think it's absolutely essential that something is done to ensure that there is much greater participation in decision-making by all members. And I think that is something that the people who are involved in this review should reflect on and do something particularly positive to ensure that that does actually take place, because there is at the moment something of a deficit. So I'm quite happy to support the amendments and the recommendations that are put forward here, and I hope that the rest of the council will do so at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Anybody else? Right. Would you like to sum up, Councillor Massey?
Yeah, I thank Councillor Nightingale for his comments. They were well put, and particularly around the position on the TVCA scrutiny board. I think, as you rightly highlighted, this is only the first of what will be kind of a lengthy process in the governance review, and the other issues he refers to are certainly things that that cross-party group can look at. So I move the report and the slight amendment to Appendix 6, which I mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. Could we have a show of hands to move the report? I think that's carried. Next one, looked after children and child sexual exploitation. Councillor Hannaway.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At the end of March, we had 236 looked after children in the borough, which is a slight reduction for once, for which we're very thankful that the numbers have gone down a bit, because obviously as the numbers rise and as it stretches capacity, it becomes increasingly complex and expensive. We have a statutory duty to find placements, and we always will do, but it's, if that was the beginning of a trend, that would be very good indeed. We also have a good healthy number of our looked after children going to our in-house foster carers, currently at 71.6%. Sometimes in these reports, I focus on a particular issue that the reports contain, but I think on this occasion I'd just like to focus on the large number, the amount of activity, the sheer range of things that are going on in the borough, in the council and also with our partners, the large number of collaborations, the training programs, the assessment, the research projects, the information sharing and awareness raising, all of those formal and informal ways in which the adults involved with our looked after children and also the children themselves come together to improve their situations and their lives. So we have our continuing skills to foster training for our new foster carers. And when we have their yearly appraisals, when they become foster carers, one of the things we always look at is how much further training they've done, particularly where there's been a change in the kind of placement that they have, or the needs of the children involved. So that's very important that we continue to offer them as many opportunities for training as possible. That also goes for the staff. You'll see in 2.7, a team manager has started a Strengthening Managers training program. And there are also similar programs for our social workers as well, to make sure that when any new research does lead to improvements in practice, that they're always aware of it. That takes us on the next page to our virtual school. For anyone who hasn't heard that term, I know most members will be familiar. Our looked after children, they're in a number of different schools across the borough, but because some of their needs are similar, we treat them as if they were in the same school, and that's what we call the virtual school. And the virtual school head reports at 2.9 about a project, a piece of important research in which Stockton, Middlesbrough and Hartlepool local authorities are working together to look at how they're taught in school. Because we know that everywhere, and this has been going on for a long time, that educational attainment for looked after children tends to be very low. There are a number of reasons for this. For example, if a child comes into care when they're already, say, 12, 13, and they have established problems at school and problems with attendance, it's quite difficult to turn those around in the short time that remains. But we're doing some collaborative research into this, and then the intention is, as you'll see further on in the report, that will lead to new teaching practices and will be rolled out into our schools. It will lead to an evidence-based research paper that will be available to all the schools as well. Anybody who came to our neglect conference, the Safeguarding Board had a conference on neglect the other day, and listened to Jenny Malloy, an author who suffered terrible neglect as a child and became a looked after child in Hackney, would have heard me ask her a question about her education. And she said there was a teacher in her life who was extremely important to her, and who, when she moved schools, actually kept in touch with her and tried to keep abreast of her progress throughout her time at school, whichever school she was at. And I think that kind of collaboration, that was obviously a very good, a very conscientious individual who had a big effect on her. And I think so collaboration between schools is very important in this area. We also continue to work closely with the North East Refugee Forum and are attempting to identify supporting lodging hosts from the Eritrean community. One of our looked after children's councils, the Council for the 13 to 18-year-olds, the Have Your Say group, has welcomed a new member and continues to grow. And among their activities recently, they've been putting together a quarterly newsletter, both for the carers and for the looked after children. They've also been discussing health assessments. Health assessments is a really hot topic in the world of looked after children, because you often get health professionals who want as many assessments as possible, and social workers who don't want the child to be over-medicalized, and as well as their other issues, to become a constant patient as well. So there's sometimes a point of tension there. So seeking the views of the children themselves is very important in that area. On the next page, 215-16, our normal adoption work goes on. We are still searching for possible families for children whose plan is adoption. We continue again to assess potential adopters and to train them. You'll notice there at 218 a joint facilitated training session with a neighbouring authority to deliver some training for adopters. And it says at the bottom of 218, by collaborating we were able to share ideas and tools to enhance future training. Onto the CSE section of the report, and you'll see more collaboration there. Bernardo's, we commissioned them to do awareness-raising sessions on child exploitation. And these particular sessions were aimed at parents with teenagers who had been referred for behavioural issues to try and deliver key strategies for maintaining and improving relationships. I recently observed a parenting programme for parents of younger children in Grangetown Children's Centre. It was a very interesting experience because the parents there, some of whom had children who were who had child protection plans, as well as the official program that they're going to try and look at their own parenting and the way they do it. I noticed also that the staff there give them a lot of unofficial help as well with various aspects of their lives. And I was impressed that meanwhile, those who had children in the creche next door, the staff with the children were working on the same kind of language as the adults were working with in the room I was in, so that when they go home, if the parent behaves differently with the child, it doesn't come as too much of a surprise to the child themselves. If we look onto the final page, you'll see there that Cleveland Police did a road show for our staff to tell us about the kind of intelligence they look for in CSE, why they want it and what they do with it. We've also been working with a primary school in the borough to develop a 6-week awareness programme on CSE at the school's request to 12 vulnerable Year 6 pupils. So that's age 10 and 11. We're also increasing awareness of CSE with our newly qualified social workers, with a new training programme for them as well. And they spend part of the time shadowing the VEMP team, the Vulnerable, Exploited, Missing and Trafficked team, practitioners group. So that's the group that deals with individual children who have been identified as being vulnerable to CSE. And the social workers will shadow the chair there and see how they do that work. Finally, elected members and our staff can access e-learning resources on CSE, and I'd really recommend that you do that, because of course the kind of intelligence that we're talking about on CSE can come not only from staff and from people involved professionally, but from counsellors as well. So if you see anything that you're not happy with, you know, and this has happened really recently, and I think this is very important, then please do report it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hannaway. So pleased to see a reduction in numbers of looked after children. I know it's not decisions that are made lightly when they go home, and safeguarding is important. And also acknowledge the hard work that's going on behind the scenes to bring on new carers, which seems to be paying dividends at the moment. But does the Cabinet member feel that it's appropriate, given that this council is in the middle of rightfully challenging the Ofsted rating, to cherry pick the positive parts of this disputed report, rather than addressing any of the areas which require improvement, or working on the goods to make them outstanding? There were several firm recommendations given in that report to improve the outcome of looked after children and care leavers in this borough, which were not mentioned at all in the report.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Dr Jackson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was going down the same lines as Councillor King, so she's done it for me. Thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Jeffrey.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Sadly, it's not all good news about looked after children. The Corporate Parenting Board at its last meeting received the report from the virtual school head, which Craig has alluded to. It was the annual report for looked after children, and he was expressing some concerns about the trend insofar as fixed exclusions from schools are concerned regarding looked after children, whereas the national trend is downwards. The trend in this authority is actually upwards. And referring to the report, which was very comprehensive, and I would urge all members to read it, it points out over the last 3 years there's been a rise in fixed term exclusions to just over 18% of the cohort. And equally worryingly, something like half of those individuals had a special educational need of one kind or another. So it would seem to suggest that some schools, stroke academies, are perhaps applying a rigid interpretation of the rules that cover temporary exclusion of children from schools. The report goes on to say that the authority has to challenge schools and academies about the high level, generally, of fixed-term exclusions, and additionally has written to the Regional Schools Commissioner. And I wish them success with getting a response to that, because of course the Regional Schools Commissioner, despite having responsibility for raising attainment levels in this authority, has consistently refused to meet with the relevant scrutiny committee, let alone the lead member himself. So I think I would be interested, or perhaps we would be interested, in a response to that particular overture. And the other thing that's arisen out of these circumstances is that the Education Improvement Partnership is reviewing its practices in terms of exclusion, and it tells us in the Virtual Heads report that that report was to be published last month. Well, I don't know if it's out yet, but I would like to suggest when it does come out, certainly People Services Scrutiny and Corporate Parenting Board get a look at it. And perhaps what we might do in addition, Chair, is to ensure that every school where there are looked after children, there should be a link governor, and if there isn't, we need to provide one from amongst our ranks.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In section 2.27, I was just querying a few things. The Bernardo's delivered a 6-week awareness programme to 12 vulnerable Year 6 pupils. Was this inside the school or was it separate? The reason I'm asking, I'm worried about the identification of these vulnerable children, which increases their problems. I assume the parents were notified and gave consent, but again that raises the problem. Why are the children vulnerable? Perhaps it's the home setting. And I do feel that this work will be better within the home and within the family, because it's very difficult teaching children one thing if it's not known back in their home. So it's sort of two questions I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 3 points to refer to the report, one which is not included in it. With reference to the target leaving care service, we seem to have a considerable number of members who, having left care, are still being supported by target. So I'd like to be sure that we have sufficient resources allocated to this support, so that those people who have left are not in any way compromised by their situation. We, I think, have taken note of the measures that the authority have undertaken to try and encourage more families to volunteer for fostering. So I'm sure all of us are very pleased about the work that's been done, and the detail of which were contained in the Cabinet report. However, in the Cabinet report, and which isn't reflected here entirely, the number of applications, not surprisingly, fall off fairly rapidly once the system of evaluation kicks in. So I'm just wondering if we are perhaps raising expectation, and this may seem a paradox, of applicants at that stage, and whether there needs to be further information. I know on the website we're developing that, so that people's aspirations are fulfilled during that process. I'm interested also to note that there is joint training now being undertaken with other authorities. Perhaps one is surprised to find that this is a novelty. We should have been doing this many years ago. I appreciate there have been certain constraints in allowing that to happen. I think we really need to redouble our efforts in this area to share experience and resources. And then I come on to the point that's missing, and that is reference to the allocation of teaching staff to look after children in schools. Now, I've highlighted this previously. I think it's of great concern that we should have as much support as possible available to look after children. And if we have, without being specific to a teacher, that principle in practice, we need to evaluate if that's working well, and if it isn't working well enough, what can be done to support that further.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. No more? Would you like to sum up, Councillor?
Certainly. Very good questions there. Councillor King, I knew last night, it occurred to me you were going to ask me that. Because when this report was done, and when I went through it with the service manager, and I saw the comments from the Ofsted report that you put in, at that point, I was hoping or thought it probable that this would be the council meeting where I actually announced the Ofsted results and talked about the issues involved. And it isn't. When I went back last night and looked at the report just to finalise what I was going to say, I thought that that's what you'd say. Can I apologise for that? Can I also thank you for the restraint that you've shown in your own motion? And I'm sorry we didn't. It was too late by the time I spotted it. But there was no intention to cherry pick. And I promise that when we actually can, when we get to the end of the process and we can actually discuss openly the Ofsted result, because it will be unchanging at that point, then there will be a full discussion of both the positives, but also the things that we need to improve. Thank you. I think that was the main issue you asked me about. Then there was, Councillor Jeffrey, your question about children, looked after children in schools. If I could link that with what Councillor Thompson said about looked after children in schools, I think your idea of a link governor, I think is a very good one. They do sometimes get a little bit lost in the system. I think the ethos of the school is the most important thing. There have been cases where there was a lack of differentiation, a lack of awareness of the particular needs of looked after children. And our visiting speaker at the Neglect Conference had a lot to say about that, about actually understanding what they're going through is the first point. I think if we can understand it, then that's half the battle. But there have been, as we know in the Corporate Parenting Board, children who have been moved from one school to another simply because the ethos in one school was not as accommodating to looked after children as the other school. I don't think that's the kind of thing that we want to happen, given that there's already been a lot of disturbance in their lives, and that it's important that the schools accommodate themselves to the needs of all their children. And I think hopefully the research project that we're doing into the teaching methods for looked after children and the way that's rolled out, particularly how it's rolled out in the Education Improvement Partnership, will hopefully address those concerns. But I think you're right, there is a lot more work to do on that. Resources in the target leaving care team, obviously I know generally resources are tight everywhere, but I don't know of any specific shortages in that area. So if you'll allow me, I'll write to you about that issue and have a good look at what the resource implications are there. And I think also this will touch on Councillor King's motion later, I think, in the area of support for people leaving care. Councillor Watts, Bernardo's. I don't know where exactly the sessions happened. I do assume, because they're very good at this work, so I assume that they really know what they're doing and wouldn't dream of doing it in a place that wasn't appropriate. But I will check on that, and I'll write to you. And I won't forget this time. I'll write it down, make a note now so I don't forget. And find out a little bit more about those sessions, where they take place. Consent, I assume there will be consent, because there's consent for everything to do with interventions with school children. But I will look into that for you. I think that's everything. Is that everything? Yeah.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hyde.
While I accept that Councillor Hannaway is absolutely genuine in everything he said, and I accept his explanation of this, I think it is a matter of judgment whether the report should or should not have the full details of the Ofsted report. And I think it's important, if we're going to get a proper perspective on what is going on and be able to make a judgment and make proper decisions, that we have the report warts and all. It may be a bit crude saying warts and all, but I think it's absolutely essential. So I think it is something that perhaps a lesson may have to be learnt for the future. But I don't think anything was sub judice or anything like that. I just think it's a matter of judgment, but I think it's very important that this council gets all the information it's necessary in order to make the decisions that it has to make.
Thank you. Yes?
Yeah.
Can reply.
You're right. I mean, we do need to have that discussion. The delay, though, is not just an administrative one. And when the time comes, we can go into this. But there are some really very important issues that have a really big effect on the work, particularly of the first contact team in the council. And there is a genuine disagreement over not just over the system, but over what's actually the best thing for the children concerned.
Thank you. Right, could we take a vote on see if we can pass the motion. Carried. To receive reports from portfolio holders. This one is the one that Councillor Sue Jeffries is going to speak on behalf of Councillor Walsh. And you've already asked if we can...
Yeah. I mean, what I said, Mr Mayor, and I hope everybody is okay with this. Obviously, Dave is very much still in control of his brief. He would be here if he could. Unfortunately, it's a mobility issue as opposed to anything else that's holding him back. He would very much like to continue to be the owner of this report. So in that regard, if you're happy to take it as written and to ask questions as you would, and we'll pass those questions to Dave, and he will bring you back comprehensive answers to those if people are comfortable with doing it that way.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Glyn Nightingale.
Thank you again, Mr Mayor. Obviously, we would send our good wishes to Councillor Walsh and hope he makes a very speedy recovery. I just want to make the point, first of all, in general, that quite clearly from this report, it reflects the national situation that we've got some very difficult decisions to make in the future and difficult choices to make in this area of the national health and in terms of social care and looking after adults. I'm by no means an expert in this area, and it's not my usual field. But I just want to make 2 points, Mr Mayor, if I may. First of all, in the introduction on 1.1, I don't think that the statistics are irrelevant. I think they are relevant, but I think it would be much better if Councillor Walsh were to provide us with details of the population changes and the ageing population changes that are actually taking place in this borough, rather than dealing with the national picture. Then, a bit of a theme of some of the points I've made this afternoon, Mr Mayor, then we can actually make a proper evaluation and judgment and make some proper decisions. Yes, it makes the point in 3.1 that it's about the adult and social care. And we on the Liberal Democrat side think it's absolutely right that there should be some more money put into it, including that it's ethically right to raise the council tax for this. There is just one further point on 2.2, Mr. Mayor. It shows improvements except in one area. But what I find, I've got to say, is, however, the picture that is painted is not particularly rosy if you're involved in the receipt of these services. In particular, in 111, is it? The third one down in the table, where people are concerned about their social contact. It's only 54% of people who feel that they have sufficient social contact, which really is a situation that we should be fairly disturbed about. So, Mr. Mayor, I think I would like Councillor Walsh to clarify under 1.1 the current population situation as far as this borough is concerned, and on the ageing population. That would be my question for him when he appears next time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lanigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's 2.7 of the report, and in 2.9 it actually goes, this is about assisted housing, and what Councillor Walsh has actually said, Mr. Mayor, is that this is being put in abeyance. I understand that the Broughton project, which is 23 bungalows going up on that site, we've actually got contractors on there clearing that site ready for these to go up. So I didn't know whether, when Councillor Walsh had written this report, and we'd just like an update actually, because given that they're there on site and that these bungalows are going ahead, whether this was written some time ago, Mr. Mayor, and that has now moved on. I do have several other questions, but I will send them to Councillor Walsh. They can wait, but it's just this one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. Councillor Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to make a personal point. My father, who never asks anything of me, has asked me if I ever had the opportunity to raise this. So if you'll just indulge me for 2 minutes, I'll be very quick. My father's had a brain tumour for 20 years, so we've been in and out of James Cook and more often than not. And about this time last year, he got diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus, and he was in hospital till November, solidly in ICU and high dependency, and then the wards, and then he went to Broughton, and he went back to James Cook, and then he went to Broughton, and carried on like that, and now he's home. And we seem to hear a lot of negative things about the NHS and about social care, but the care that he received from everyone has been excellent, and since he's been home, the team have been outstanding on nearly a weekly basis. Another piece of equipment seems to turn up to help, and we've got occupational therapists and we've got dietitians, and it's just marvellous. And he wanted to say that on this occasion the NHS is not broken, and to thank the social care team, and if Councillor Walsh could pass that on, our thanks to the team, because they really have, although he can't eat, they have maintained his quality of life for him, and their support has allowed us to care for him at home, and we're just very grateful. If Councillor Walsh could pass that on for me, please.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to endorse the sentiments expressed that Councillor Walsh experiences a rapid recovery. I have to record, however, that his experience had absolutely nothing to do with my chairmanship of the committee, and indeed, even though he did attempt to bring the conclusion earlier than we would have done, that failed. But we do wish him the very best, and I would ask his colleagues to convey that. Perhaps I could answer Councillor Lanigan's question by referring to 210 on page 30, which sets out the background to why it has been possible to extend and to implement one of the chosen options. But it reinforces, Mr. Mayor, the need to look at this provision. We've said that one of the main reasons why we can't proceed with the capital investment is because the providers are not convinced about their future revenue return. We need to be doing absolutely everything we can to work with third-party providers to ensure them that we will have in place, either with this authority or working in conjunction with the government, that revenue stream to allow this capital investment to proceed. It is absolutely essential that it does. I am pleased to see that we are again coming back to the point I made earlier about partnership working. The health service field is so complex, and if there's anybody in this room who could give me a briefing as to how it all fits together and all works in practice, I would welcome that. So working together with health partners is of vital importance, given the complexity, not just of the provision of services, but the resources in terms of human and financial. So we've really got to up our game in terms of working with other partners, questioning what they're doing in terms of delivery. I would like to endorse the early supported discharge project that we're looking to have as a standard. I think that's absolutely vital, so I give that full support. And in respect of the green paper that is about to appear, or may not appear, and I realise we're in purdah, so I say no more than that. The long-term funding of adult social care is clearly something that we've got to keep at the very top of our agenda. I would ask that the funding that has been secured and has been made available through the most recent government allocation is absolutely ring-fenced, that we have a security of that money and that we have a scrutiny of its spend.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Jeffries, would you like to say anything?
Now, what I said I wasn't going to do and answer all those questions, but I do just want to say to Councillor Nightingale, first of all, I don't think you'll have to wait until Dave appears next time. I think you'll get your answers quite soon, so I wouldn't worry about that. And I was just going to say to Councillor Lanigan that the paragraph 210, that there is going to be a start on site shortly and open early next year, so that's important. I think it's great. Thank you, Councillor Jackson, for those kind words about the service. I've absolutely no doubt that Patrick will make sure they're passed on to the people concerned. It's really good when we get good news stories like that, and that's really good to hear. So thank you so much for that, and I hope your father's doing very well. And then finally, the points that Councillor Thompson has made about you know, the long-term funding of adult social care. I think that's a crucial issue for all of us in this chamber, and something that we're going to have to think about very long and carefully. Hopefully the Green Paper will help with that, but inevitably there is going to be pressure on us again next year in relation to the adult social care levy, and I, with you, want to see that extra money that we've been given spent on something specific and easy for us to identify and point out that will actually make a real difference to care needs, and hopefully we'll see some clear plans on that shortly. But I've no doubt Dave will give you much more comprehensive answers to all of those things, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Right, let's move on to questions to members of the council. There is none. Just a few smiles there. Right, consider motions. Motion 1, moved by Councillor Bendelaw. Would you like to speak on the motion?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The RMT members have voted by 83.6% to take strike action in support of their campaign for passengers to be able to keep the guarantee of a guard on every Northern train. Northern Rail passengers are currently
meeting, you stood up and accosted Councillor Watts for not reading the motion directly off the paper. So I request that the motion is read directly off the paper, if that's necessary, please.
No, a question.
That was a question. This is a motion. Plus, I didn't accost. I just related what was going on, and it wasn't to read directly off the thing. It was to do with what was about the question, not anything else. So, would you please carry on?
Thank you. Northern Rail passengers are currently guaranteed a train guard on every Northern Rail train. The guard is safety critical and trained to assist in protecting the safety of the train and passengers, as well as providing advice, assistance, check and sell tickets, and to assist disabled passengers to embark and disembark at unstaffed stations. The RMT are in dispute with Northern Rail because the company are proposing to end the guarantee of a guard on every train by introduced driver control operation, also known as driver only operation, on at least half of Northern Rail services. The RMT does not want to dispute, and indeed recently made agreements with Trans-Pennine Express, ScotRail, East Coast and Great Western, which retains the guarantee of a guard on every train. All these agreements cover the new modern faster trains that are being ordered for the new franchises. Northern are pressing ahead with their plans despite previous comments by the outgoing managing director that there were no plans to do driver-only operation, and that Northern were prepared to offer guarantees around a second person on board trains in addition to the driver. Northern appear to be saying they are mandated to introduce driver-only operation under the terms of their franchise agreement, which is jointly overseen by Rail North and the Department of Transport. The RMT believe there is nothing in this franchise agreement which should prevent Northern from reaching an agreement with the RMT that keeps a guarantee of such safety critical guard on every Northern train. If Northern Rail do not think such an agreement is within their power, then the Rail North councils are within their rights to seek to make the appropriate changes to the franchise agreement from the government to allow such a deal to take place. Some commentators will try and belittle Northern Rail guards by saying this is about who opens and closes train doors. This is an insult to the guards. The dispute is about passengers and keeping the guarantee of a safety critical guard on all trains. The guard's vital safety critical duties include protecting the train, safely securing the doors, and dealing with emergencies such as derailments, fires, driver incapacity, and if there was a failure of train safety systems. I'll give you a couple of examples of what the train guards have done recently. On Merseyside, following the collision between a train and a road vehicle, the guard isolated the electrical rail and evacuated the passengers to safety while the driver remained in his cab suffering from minor concussion. In Watford, there was a landslide derailment. The driver was effectively trapped in his cab, and it was the guard who played the crucial role in dealing with the emergency, including evacuating the passengers. A Merseyrail Northern Land Guard faced down a sex attacker who had just assaulted a female passenger and attempted to rob her. The guard alerted the police and ensured the victim was able to get home safely. A guard on a service from Manchester Airport assisted a passenger who had been assaulted, helping her report the incident to police. The victim praised the guard's unbelievable kind and compassionate manner, and she did not know what she would have done if there hadn't been a guard on the train. Even the rail regulator, which is also the economic regulator and funded by the employers, has refused to say getting rid of guards is safe for the obvious reason that if someone goes wrong on the train. Other franchises are getting a new model rolling stock and keeping their guard on every train. I hope we can pass this motion and agree the same for Northern Rail. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Jeffrey.
Second it and reserve the right to speak, Chair, which I wish to do.
Yes. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've just had a few people glance in my general direction because of the email I sent out this morning to the Chief Legal Officer about this motion being put forward after there's something very similar in the leaked draft manifesto from the Labour Party. I've had advice from the Senior Legal Officer and he says he's quite happy with this to go ahead, so that's why I've just left it as it is. It doesn't make any specific points as such that would make a strong political point. I think I'm right in saying. So unless anybody else has got anything against this, I'm quite happy for it to go ahead. I'm not comfortable. I would much rather it would have been postponed to the next meeting out of purdah, but I will also take advice on board from the qualified experts.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eyre.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I start on my spiel, when it comes to health and safety amongst the public, I don't believe that politics should come into it, and I don't think politics is anywhere into this motion or proposed motion, Mr. Mayor. However, that said, like many of us, if not all of us in this chamber, I've travelled the length and breadth of the UK on train, and again, similar there to many of us in this chamber, if not all, I've travelled on trains in Europe and other parts of the world, and I've got to say, when it comes to travel care, if I can put it that way, and in particular there too, for those who unfortunately are invalids and having difficulties in walking, compared to most of the social care in countries, and I use the word social there with the small s, the UK lacks greatly behind them. It does. I've noticed there just recently, as many of you know there, just come back from Australia, used their trains, and I've seen conductors on there helping those who needed the help, on and off, and indeed, when they got off the train, make sure there that they were outside and they got on a bus okay or a taxi. So it's important. If we don't have conductors on the trains, who's going to help them people? And the safety there of other travellers on trains. If anybody wants to, a glaring example, on a Saturday night, get on that last train, or the last two trains from York to Middlesbrough, and see what goes on that train. They're packed on like a sardine can. And the unsocial behaviour that's going on there, and the problems that they give to decent travellers is unknown. It's unknown. Never mind just one or two conductors on that train. It needs one or two in every carriage. So, based on the health and safety of not only for those unfortunate people who are invalid or have walking difficulties, the whole concept of safety travel, we must retrain our guards and conductors on the train. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ian Jeffrey. Can I just say that I'm going to speak a little bit over or whatever, but please use your common sense and just keep the questions there and keep the answers. So, Councillor Ian Jeffrey. Sorry.
Chair, thank you. Just a word about purdah, if I may. Members of the Council will recall the court action that was brought against the government in the last week or so over the lack of publication of the pollution strategy, which they tried to kick into the long grass after the general election, but the court ruled they had to publish it, and they have. And incidentally, the news for us is the book's going to be passed down to local level if it goes ahead. But the judge ruled that purdah was a convention, not a law. Some people try to use it as some sort of a smoke screen to stifle debate. Members will be aware of another long-running dispute involving driver-only trains with Southern Rail operating the commuter belt into London. And despite the inconvenience passengers, many of those passengers actually have sympathy for the union position. They're also frustrated over the government's refusal to intervene. I mean, who wouldn't want an additional person on an overcrowded train, as Billy's alluded to, with a great potential for accident or emergency? And again in the southeast, an allied but unreported situation is that regarding the rollout of an Oyster-type smart card, which would enable hassle-free ticketing. This has dragged on now for a number of years because the 11 train franchisees cannot agree on their individual profit element, remembering, of course, that their chief duty is to their shareholders and not to abstract ideas regarding passenger comfort and safety. Some £54 million has already gone into this scheme, and it's proposed another 80 will go in further. And this is from the Department of Transport, in addition to the billions that go in to subsidise the train companies in any case. If we had a single national train company operating, that scheme could be introduced relatively quickly, and perhaps in addition we could call such a company British Rail. The dispute at Southern Rail and now at Northern Rail is about profit, not the safety of passengers and those of rail workers. A recent poll of Northern Rail passengers found overwhelming opposition to driver-only operation, with 75% saying they feared for their safety if the train had no guard. 12,000 passengers actually took the time to write to the government opposing the proposals. And we know, don't we, that in a post-Brexit May government, heaven forbid, we would very likely have a health and safety legislation subject very firmly to some sort of a review. That's been well signalled. In 1996, I attended my first and only Labour Party conference, at which the then leader, T. Blair, pledged to take the railways back into public ownership, a position consistently supported ever since by the British public again ahead of the politicians. It never happened, but under a Corbyn government, it certainly will. I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffries. Councillor Glyn Nightingale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think I've got to declare prejudicial interest. My dad was a guard, and I used to have an Ian Allen Spotter's book, so I really couldn't resist intervening on this particular issue, if you'll indulge me for speaking yet again this afternoon. Right. I must admit I was rather appalled with the Southern Rail strike. I think there should be a better way of dealing with issues than actually occurred down there, and a lot of people were seriously and detrimentally affected by the strike. And I don't intend, Mr. Mayor, to get into the wider issue of nationalisation, but of course I do look fondly on the inefficiencies, lateness, scruffiness of British Rail trains that my dad used to be a guard with. I even went in the guard's van. I'm sure it's quite illegal, when he took me to Southport and places like that. Right, now then, as far as this particular issue is concerned, I think the world has changed since the world of British Rail and with advanced technology and so forth. And if we're focusing on passenger trains, it does seem to me to be absolutely inconceivable that we don't have a representative of the train company on the trains. These days, well, let's just go back in the past, shall we? Because when I were a lad, we used to have things like platform tickets, where you paid a penny to go on the platform. There's a bloke at the back, a ticket collector at the barrier who would stop you going on the platform, even if you didn't have your platform ticket. And if you didn't have your ticket for the train, you couldn't get on the platform. I was at the Manchester United winning cup final last year, where Manchester United won, and I was going back to London on the train. We got on the platform with some supporters of Crystal Palace, who you certainly would not invite to a candlelit dinner. They got on the train, and they were banging on the ceiling. They were argy-bargy singing and so forth. They'd lost, and of course, as a Manchester United supporter, we kept very quiet, my boss and I. And I'm not even sure she was a Manchester United supporter. She hated the match, and she was quite bored there because there's no commentary. Anyway, where were the company protecting their property with a guard enforcing control? I mean, it would have been very difficult for one guard to control that. But it does point to the fact that for safety reasons, for protection of the policy, of their property, the companies really ought to do this. And they ought to be there to ensure that people actually do pay. We got to some, whatever it was, in London, free. So, you know, I'm quite sure the whole load of those Crystal Palace supporters didn't pay either. So, for reasons of safety, as Councillor Eyre has mentioned, for reasons of sensible business practice, you would expect there was actually somebody there to ensure that people actually paid. And for that reason, I think the Liberal Democrats would be quite willing to support this particular motion. But let's make sure that this sort of issue is resolved with sensible industrial relations and not detrimentally harm the people who actually travel on the railways. We need the railways. They should be kept and preserved. We need better railways, and I'm not absolutely convinced that nationalisation would be the solution.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. Would you like to sum up, please, Councillor Bensler?
Well, seeing there's been no opposition, there's not much to say, really, but just a few more bits I've just got here. There's 61% of the stations that Northern visit haven't even got any guards, no one there, so anyone who's disabled would not be able to use that the train. I'd like to thank everyone else for getting in on the debate, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Could we take this to the vote for the motion? All for the... Carried. Thank you. Motion number 2 by Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're all corporate parents, and this motion is one I've looked at bringing to the council for several months, having mixed feelings myself about it, fearing cries of nepotism and preferential treatment maybe from fellow councillors. If Joe Bloggs the builder suddenly became Joe Bloggs and son or Joe Bloggs and daughter, there'd be no such cry. So I see this as giving our children another reason to work hard, prove the statistics and stigma wrong about children in care, and if they make the required standards for a particular post and they do want to pursue that avenue, then we should be giving them every opportunity to do so. Our looked after children rarely start from the same level playing field as their peers. Often they've moved schools, homes or even areas. They have often had disruption in their education due to family or placement breakdowns. Many overcome these hurdles and achieve well, either academically or vocationally, if given the right support and education for them to do so. And I believe this borough and this council really does support the education and opportunities for these children. My eventual aim from this motion is to ensure that a variety of council apprenticeships are ring-fenced for our care leavers who meet the required standards for the posts. At the moment, they are guaranteed an interview, but this does not go far enough. No looked after child would be pushed onto an apprenticeship they had no desire to pursue or indeed the skills and qualifications to complete. If these positions were not filled, then normal recruitment practice would then follow. The reason for the timing of this motion was the recent Ofsted inspection, which stated excellent practice is evident within the leaving care team, something I've witnessed myself, and I know we have a dedicated and professional team doing everything we can to help these young people do the best they can. There were, however, several comments with regards to apprenticeships for care leavers as follows. Page 3, the local authority has not developed opportunities for care leavers to access its apprenticeship. Page 9, the local authority needs to increase opportunities for care leavers to secure places on the local authority's apprenticeship scheme. Page 10, there should be more help and support care leavers on their own apprenticeship scheme. 17, apprenticeships for care leavers are not routinely embedded. And page 26 says that overall the authority has acquitted itself well as a corporate parent. However, there are some areas which the council does not fulfil the role effectively enough. One of this is that they miss opportunities to fast-track care leavers onto its own apprenticeship scheme, and this is followed by Ofsted with the word recommendation. Therefore, after the findings of the regional group mentioned in the motion are gathered and assessed, I hope the above points will be given full consideration by all officers and members involved and implemented as soon as possible. To the motion, this council notes that research by the Children's Commissioner for England last year showed that just 3% of care leavers aged between 19 and 21 were on apprenticeships in 2015, compared with 24% of young people generally, and that of young people not at university, the chance of obtaining an apprenticeship is 8 times more likely for those who have not been in care. The Council further notes the work of the regional group, which is currently being undertaken with a mandate from leaders and chief executives of the North East Councils to develop a consistent regional offer for care leavers, including apprenticeships where appropriate. The Council commits to the principles of this work and giving full consideration of the findings of the group via the Corporate Parenting Board, with a view in particular to agreeing actions which will ensure the availability of appropriate apprenticeships for care leavers wherever possible.
Thank you, Councillor King. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak. However, I would just like it amending slightly, in as much as there's a typing error at the end of the first paragraph, which has an extra 2 in it. So if we could just delete that word. It currently reads, is 8 times more likely to for those. And it should just say, is 8 times more likely for those.
That's all right, that's fine. Councillor Hannaway.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What's the opposite of cherry picking, Councillor King? Actually, no, this is a very important motion, and it is very timely as well. And I think some of the criticisms that you've listed there, frankly, could have applied not just to our offer to look after children, but I think in the past to the offer we make more generally, and apprenticeships, and indeed the skills agenda, which we've had to make a lot of changes in recently. And I can see those changes being made. And I think since the skills agenda came into the children's portfolio, I've been to 2 Foundations for Jobs meetings, and the second one was very much improved on the first one. So I'm very hopeful that this work is underway now. And although we don't normally single out individual officers, I would like to praise the work of Denise Bolins, because I think she's really got a grip on this and is doing very well. I really wish her luck in doing so. So as I said, it's a very good and timely motion. The Regional Care Leavers meeting, the Leaders and Elected Mayors group that you reference in your motion, I understand that the care leavers there made a very powerful presentation about being in care and subsequently becoming a care leaver. That they were suggesting that we work across the region to develop a consistent entitlement, and that this was accepted in principle, and that the group are working with the Association of Directors of Children's Services across the region to develop what this will look like. And one key element is agreed apprentices for all of those who need them. And that they'll also be returning as well to that group in June. And we are obviously proactively involved in that work. Also, you'll be aware, Councillor King, that our Looked After Children's Council themselves have been actively involved in a regional looked after and leaving care group, and that over the past year this has specifically focused on key issues and themes that care leavers across the northeast of England have raised. One being the opportunity to access in-house council apprenticeships. With some authorities, and including us now, I know that Denise has agreed and is happy to add the commitment, so I think your motion has done its work already in a way, has made a commitment not only to the guaranteed interviews that you mentioned, but also to ring fencing a percentage of the in-house apprenticeships for our care leavers. So I think you've achieved what you set out to there. I know you also attended a conference last year organised by this regional group. Presumably it was there that you learnt about the ambitions of care leavers to achieve a regional offer. So thank you very much for the work you've done there, and I support your motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to sum up, please, Councillor King?
Thank you. Yeah, I think, yeah, I take the point on the opposite of cherry picking, but it was purely about apprenticeships, and they were the only mentions of apprenticeships. So, and just really pleased, as I say, in no way was it to take away from the hard work I know that is going on. I know this council is really passionate about young people, but with so many mentions, I felt like we were missing an opportunity. We did get good on Ofsted rating for care leavers. Maybe the addition of this and a few more tweaks, we're looking at outstanding at the next assessment. So thank you. Oh, sorry, last thing. I'm leaving straight from here to go to the Thought Leaders Project, which is an initiative set up by Lawrence McNally of the Junction. It involves NHS, council, schools, charities, and it's looking at an overall improvement of care leavers. There might be several people here involved, I'm not sure, so I'm hoping to go back with good news straight from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Could we take this to the vote for the motion? All for? Carried. To appoint members, there is none. Right. Thank you for your attention and your involvement. And that's it. That's all, folks. Thank you.